Do you like fantasy? Well, considering you clicked on a video about Elder Scrolls, I think it's safe to assume you probably do. Since you're a fan of fantasy, you know that in fantasy there are three main classes of character. Obviously, there's subclasses and things, mostly just variations of these three. First and most common are the strong and tough warriors, attacking viciously with large weapons and tanking enemy damage with heavy armor. Or you can go the complete opposite route. Play a cunning and stealthy rogue that takes out his enemies with well-placed arrow shots or a quick unseen slice from a dagger. But as cool as these two classes are, every fantasy fan must stand in absolute awe of the wizard, or mages, or sorcerers, or whatever you want to call them. What we're talking about here are those wielders of magic, those characters capable of taking down foes, healing allies, altering reality, and still so much more. No joke, these robe-wearing, staff-wielding nerds seriously feel like they can do it all. And the old Elder Scrolls games really gave off that vibe. I mean, with the vast amount of spells, spell making, and the mechanics within the game, they really gave you what you needed to feel on par with real-world legendary wizards. I'm talking about the main man Merlin himself, you guys. So tell me why, Bethesda, for all that is holy and right in these oh so amazing games, would you strip all of that away from us? Don't get me wrong, Skyrim has magic, but compared to what it was in the previous games, this doesn't feel very magical. And sure, a lot of the spell effects look really good. They look way better than they used to, but we're talking about possibility here. And when it comes to that, Bethesda, you once again sold the bag. Similar to what I said about getting rid of the karma system in Fallout, I think Bethesda absolutely tanked the feeling of immersion, especially as a mage. Oh, and they started just dumbing down the magic. I mean, don't even get me started on the guilds. What is this lame ass shit? To really showcase this, I want to go over some of the magic that was in the older games. Mostly, I'm going to be talking about Morrowind here. Because A, I feel like Morrowind and Skyrim have enough differences that there's enough I can talk about there. So the way I see it, anything I have to say about spells that got taken away, if they were taken away for Oblivion, I have the same thing to say about them as they do for Skyrim. Anything about spells that appear in Morrowind, if they appear in Oblivion, I have the same thing to say about them as I would for Morrowind. Also because Morrowind is the best. It's the peak of the series. And if you disagree with that, go argue with a wall. Alright people, let's take a look at this magic. All the way back in Morrowind, magic was at what I would assume most people would consider to be the absolute peak of what it is in the series. But if you're anything like me, you probably think this whole game was the peak of the series because it was and still is the shit. But this video is about magic, so I'm gonna try to stick to that. Just right off the bat, Morrowind has an entire school of magic that isn't in Skyrim, and that, my friends, was mysticism, which really sucks because mysticism was personally my favorite school of magic. It gave you access to what I feel like are just all the sickest spells, the ability to absorb almost everything. There was absorb health, spells, fatigue, and attributes. Plus, you could also detect almost anything. We're talking animals, enchantments, even keys. Then you got all the other cool stuff. Demoralize, dispel, reflect, mark and recall, telekinesis, soul trap, and both intervention spells. That's 3 teleportation abilities, by the way. I know that doesn't seem as cool because everybody can fast travel now, but you can't fast travel indoors, can you? No. You can't. That's what I thought. And sure, while the whole school is gone, some of these spells do appear in Skyrim. I mean, you do have Soul Trap still in Conjuration. They added Absorb Health to Destruction, I believe, with the Anniversary Edition. And they added things like Telekinesis to Alteration, but it sucks. It's way worse than it was in Morrowind. You can't convince me that this is better than this. You're not gonna convince me. This looks cool. Don't get me wrong. It looks cool. Practically, I hate it. I hate it. And why can't I stop an arrow mid-air? That would probably save it a little bit. What else do I want to use that for? And for real, I just said you can't fast travel indoors. It would have been still nice to have spells like Mark and Recall and the intervention spells. So, yeah, already a sold bag in my opinion, but that's just one school of magic, people. We got a whole list of these things to get through. I also can't go through every spell of every school because it would take too long, which I feel like that proves my point a little bit. But there were spells in those other schools that don't appear in Skyrim at all. So let's get into them. Starting with Conjuration, you were able to summon almost anything that you wanted, which is what Conjuration should be, by the way. I'm not even gonna list them, I'm just gonna show them. This is the list of all the stuff you could summon. Pretty much every armor placement and every creature that appears in the game. Not just a handful of ghosts and the 5 or so Atronarchs that you have. I don't even know what to highlight in this because a lot of these creatures don't even appear in Skyrim. I mean, Winged Twilights, Golden Saints, that's sick. And summoning a Curus, why don't they have summon armors in Skyrim? They had that in Oblivion as well. Why isn't that in Skyrim? That would have been awesome. This is what Conjuration should be, being able to conjure things, summon things. It doesn't feel very conjury in Skyrim. I mean, sure, you're conjuring souls and stuff like that. You're conjuring ghosts most of the time, but like, I'd rather have this stuff. I'd rather have all of this. This is way better. And I mean, you could pretty much say the same thing about Restoration. There is a cure, a resist, a fortification for quite literally everything that can affect you within the game. Which again, same thing I had to say about Conjuration. This is what Restoration should be. This is what it should be. I mean, sure, you can heal in Skyrim, and there's a couple of those like attack spells they add towards the end of it, but why? Why would we give attack spells to Restoration over being able to cure every disease, fortify every skill, and resist every spell and thing? I mean, don't get me wrong, you've got the wards, and those are cool. I think the wards are awesome. I think they should definitely keep the wards. But that's just a resist spells. There was a resist for everything. A restoration spell that allows you to resist paralysis. A restoration spell that allows you to resist poison, stuff like that. There should be restoration spells for almost everything that there's like a potion for. Essentially, like that's what restoration should be, in my opinion. Now, a big reason for Morrowind spells feeling as diverse as they are is likely because of Morrowind having a lot of mechanics that Skyrim just doesn't have. Most of these being your classic RPG mechanics, things like attributes, hit chance, spellcasting chance, gear conditioning, just to name a few. That alone can make Morrowind's magic feel way more expanded upon because they can create a spell that affects each and every one of those things, which is what they did. And I don't feel like Skyrim did that. I feel like Skyrim still has a lot of mechanics that they didn't use magic to mess with and tweak and alter like I feel they should have. I mean, moving on to Illusion, for example, has things like silence and sound, which can make it harder for mage enemies to cast spells at you. Or you have Blind and Sanctuary, which both can make it harder for enemies that deal physical damage to land hits on you. As for attributes, I already talked about how Restoration allows you to fortify those things, and Mysticism allows you to absorb them from other people, but Destruction also allows you to either permanently damage them or temporarily drain them from your enemies. Then add the fact that Destruction has other spells like Disintegrate weapons and armor, and your character can quite literally use magic to drain out every intimidating factor of an enemy rushing at you. Imagine if in Skyrim the Ebony Warrior was running at you and you could just disintegrate all of his gear and absorb all the strength from him. That would be so sick. But if you want to talk about something that's really sick, let's talk about Morrowind's Alteration, because in Skyrim, this is the most nerfed school of magic in the entire game. I have always felt that the Alteration school in Magic is the worst school of magic, which makes me really sad because to me, it is second only to Mysticism in Morrowind. It is one of the coolest schools of magic and has some of the sickest and most helpful spells in that game. It was a beast. I mean, to kick it off, you had spells like Burden and Feather, which essentially altered the carry weight of whatever they were used on. Feather obviously made you lighter, Burden made you heavier. Which, I mean, seems a little basic, but I still feel like both would be sick in Skyrim. Imagine not having to deal with slowly meandering over to the shopkeeper whenever you've got too much stuff. You just feather and you can walk right over to the guy. Or imagine being in a fight and you can just hit bandits with burden, and all of a sudden all of them are slowly hobbling around like they got shot in the legs in Fallout. Then you got your fire, lightning, and frost shields, your jump boost, your swift swim, and your slow falls, which I feel like I don't need to say anything about any of those. Yes, Bethesda, obviously, add them back, please. And oh my god, don't even get me started on lock and open. You know what? What else are we doing here? Let's get into lock and open. Now, lock, I don't really have that much care for. It's kind of whatever. I don't even know if it appears in Oblivion, and if it does, shit. But if it's not, I kind of get it, and like I said, I don't really care. The only real use I've ever gotten out of lock is when I deal with a really hard enemy, and I gotta run away from them into a room, close the door behind me, and hit it with the lock spell so they can't come through, and then I can sit in there and refill whatever it is I have to refill. But open? Open? Open was one of the best spells in the game, especially if you wanted to play a magic-based thief. I mean, sure, you can get good at sneaking and lockpicking and be a thief the boring way, or you can use a combination of spells like invisibility or chameleon, telekinesis, and open in order to have an immersive experience as a mage thief. But here's the thing, all of that pales in comparison to the best spell in all of Morrowind. Pretty much the entire reason I even decided to make this video. We're talking about levitate. This was seriously the sickest spell in the game. Like activating TCL without having to go into Councilman's or going to Lig. Yeah, I don't know if this is confirmed or not. My theory, go read the description of Lig. It is 100% when you go through the world on accident. But for real, levitate was awesome. Being able to just fly around wherever you wanted. Plus all the cool stuff they added for you to find while doing that. I mean, it added so much to the world building and design of the whole game. Using levitate to get up to some mountain you wouldn't be able to get up to otherwise, and finding out they placed a chest there just for that. And Morrowind was the only game that Levitate appeared in. Likely because it would have probably been a little too ambitious for Arena and Daggerfall. Also, after Morrowind, they separated all their cities and major areas into different cells. So I don't think they wanted people just floating over the walls of the Imperial City or Whiterun. But I mean, come on, still. I know they made up some bullshit about the Empire legalizing it, but that is just a cop-out. Give us this spell back, Bethesda. Because, like, let's be real, I wanna be fair to Skyrim for a minute. It is beautiful. It's one of the first Elder Scrolls games I've ever played, and I really loved it. It was one of my favorite games. It is still one of my favorite games to this day. I won't deny that it is an awesome and especially an awesome looking game. I mean, one of the first Elder Scrolls games to actually be on par with, or sometimes straight up outclass, the other games at the time in terms of graphics. Most of the time, they did not do that. I know there's a couple bugs and tweaks, but I said I'm being fair right now. But with that level of detail and how beautiful the game is, that just makes me want it even more. I mean, imagine things like the notch pickaxe. I mean, think about how many other things like that would have been added to the game with levitate. You would have been using levitate to go up inside of every single tomb and cave and on top of every mountain, just in case there was a chest or something like that, which I know is a thing a lot of people have complained about with Skyrim. Games like Morrowind and Oblivion, they rewarded you for exploring, for using those abilities. It doesn't really feel like they do as much in this game. And I mean, come on, Bethesda, it would be so cool. I will suspend my disbelief of an invisible wall stopping me from entering an ungenerated city if you will just give me the spell back. I just want a better view, people. It won't break the lore. Just make it to where the guards get you in trouble for using it. That would be a cool thing to add, a cool mechanic to add into the game. Spells that get you fines, illegal spells that you can't do in front of people. I mean, they kind of have that in ESO with the necromancer stuff. Also, one of the reasons it feels like there's such a vast, diverse amount of spells is not just because there are, but it's also kind of the way the spells work, which is a little hard to explain, but like, hear me out. In Morrowind, you do have spells like, say, First Barrier and Second Barrier, but they aren't really different spells in the same way that like Oak Flesh and Dragonhide are different spells. Instead, they're more just variations of the same exact shield spell. I know what you're saying. My guy, in Skyrim, they're pretty much just different mage armor spells, but like, yes and no. It's really hard for me to highlight what I'm trying to get at without talking about the main thing that makes all this so much clearer: spell making. Making spells in Morrowind was an amazing part of that game, a pretty broken part of that game, but an awesome one. And the main reason it kind of highlights what I'm saying is because once you actually get into the spell making part of it, you really do realize that none of the actual different spells in Morrowind really matter. It's just the spell effect that matters. And even for spell making, that's all you need. I mean, you want to take all your elemental spells, slam them together, and deal as much damage, and duration, and area of effect with them as you can. Hey, as long as you've got the magicka to cast it and the gold to pay for it, it's yours, buddy. You want to roleplay some specifically fire magic guy like you're the Elder Scrolls Human Torch? Go ahead. It's not like you need different spells. You just need the fire damage effect learned, and then you can make whatever spell variation from that you desire. What I'm trying to say is the possibilities felt endless, not just with what you could do, but with what you could do with what you could do, if that makes sense. And look, I want to end this video by saying I do love Skyrim. It is a great game, a fantastic game. But I will always hold the opinion that, especially when compared to its predecessors, the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim just left way too much to be desired magically. So please, Bethesda, I know you're in the kitchen cooking us something up real nice with Elder Scrolls 6. I fucking hope. But please, let's get some more magic shoved back into these games. I will wait for it. I will wait for greatness. All right, later, nerds.